Star Trek will not be presented tonight, so that we may bring you the following special program.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. How you doing, everybody? Welcome back. It's time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress with you. I am happy to welcome back a great author that I always enjoy his books and his short stories. He spent some good time in the Star Trek universe, and I'm glad to have him back. We're going to talk about a couple new projects, but also talk some Trek, given that the Section 31 movie dropped this weekend. But it's Keith DeCandido. It's good to see you, Keith. Welcome back.
How you doing, John? Good to be here.
I saw you talking about the movie on your Facebook page, and I jumped in, and I was really glad to hear you talking about it. But also, before we get to the movie, I had no idea, and I went to your YouTube channel where you used to read a lot of your stories and everything that you had written. And it had been like over 10 years since you wrote your last Star Trek thing. But I guess for the Star Trek Explorer magazine, moment of silence for Titan publication that I enjoyed, but they would provide short stories. And you wrote this great Nog Esri Deep Space Nine story. It was fantastic, man.
I got to do 5 stories for Explorer before they pulled the plug on it. Unfortunately, it was great. I really enjoyed writing it. I did. That was the first one, the Nog one, which was mostly done in tribute to Aaron Eisenberg, who was a friend of mine, and who I miss very much. And he was a great guy. He and I had actually talked about collaborating on a Star Trek novel back 20 years ago, and nothing ever came of it. But the story I did, You Can't Buy Fate, was meant as a tribute to him. But I also did a Voyager short story, a Discovery short story, and actually 2 Discovery short stories, and another story that doesn't really, it's hard to classify it. It's a Ferengi story. It takes place right shortly after the first contact with the Ferengi in the first season of Next Generation, but it's actually based on a line of dialogue from a Voyager episode. There was Tom Paris mentioned in passing that a couple of Ferengi tried to break into Fort Knox, so I told that story.
Oh, that's great. That's funny.
That was fun.
Yeah, man. I always love the Ferengi stories, even the Voyager one that they did and everything. So yeah, I that's cool. And of course, they're at Quark's at that opening episode of Voyager and everything too, and Quark trying to bilk Harry Kim out of some money and everything. Very funny.
And then the I also did the second Discovery. The first Discovery story. It was actually the first Discovery story they did in the magazine ever. And it was the backstory for President Rillick, the Federation president, who was in
who's part Cardassian, part Bajoran, and part was she 2 or 3?
Human also, yeah. She was
the third. What was the third race, or was she only 2 races?
She did have some human ancestry also.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Yeah. And actually, that's one of the few aspects of Discovery I found intriguing. So is that set? We'll get into it. And truly, Keith, I'm not here to, argue with you in any real bad way. But honestly, I like talking to people who like a lot of the new product more than I do. And I go every week with the thought of, well, maybe I'll like this episode. And I mostly liked the first season of Strange New Worlds. Second season, I thought got too gimmicky. And you'll forgive me, but as a guy who knows the geek culture as well as you do, it's like it's only your second season and you're doing a musical. It's like, Buffy and Xena waited many years.
Yeah, but
before they did that.
You've got that many people with good pipes in the show.
True.
Celia Rose Gooding is an amazing singer, just like Nichelle Nichols was, and
That's true.
And that's half the reason I think why they were doing it. And Ethan Peck and Christina Chung and
Christina Chung's a really great singer too. Absolutely.
Yeah. And
is there another one that
I'm blanking?
That sings? Jess Bush did a good job with her song.
Are all excellent, and the ones who can't sing were very carefully not given anything big to do. But which same thing they did in the Buffy episode.
So what was your other Discovery story?
The other one I did was it was actually I managed to incorporate references to every single piece of Star Trek prior to it also, but it was a story that focused on Detmer, the pilot of the
That's Keith. That is great because and honestly, I would love to know the reason why. And I know a couple writers that have previously worked on newer Trek stuff, but it always felt to me, especially in Discovery, that they had a lot of characters that you saw because action happens on the bridge. And Detmer got a little bit of story after a few years. Then there was the woman who sat next to her. The
Washington, yeah.
Say her name.
Washington.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again,
they both got little bits, and unfortunately, they got the in the final season. The two actors who played Detmer and Washington were not available for the whole season because they had other gigs, and they didn't know when they did season 5 that it was going to be the last one. I know the plan from what I've heard. The plan was to do more with them in season 6, which never actually happened. The show, it's frustrating. I mean, with both Discovery and Lower Decks, they were really both canceled way sooner than I wish they had, just because they were really hitting their stride. Both shows were really hitting their stride. And I honestly, the best thing Discovery did was jump forward to the 32nd century. I thought the show was significantly more interesting at that point, and it's what I think they should have done in the first place.
Potentially it was, but I honestly felt that they kind of missed the mark. I want to acknowledge Larry Young watching us.
Hi, Larry.
And as Larry said, the bridge crew was crazily underserved in disco.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't what the show was about, and I like the fact that the show had a slightly different focus. I mean, basically, Discovery was about every other ship captain we'd seen was already there when it started. This was showing actually two characters' journeys, because Saru's journey was just as important.
Agreed.
Watching them go from being junior officers to how they became great captains, and I like that just as something different, different from the usual structure we get.
Well,
honestly,
that premise to me was a good thing to do, and it was okay. Fine, this first, Burnham starts as a first officer. Okay, let's watch her journey. That's fine. But I also felt that, and Michael Piller, especially during Next Generation, is like, all right, it's a crew, and every now and then we're going to have to feature these other people. Frankly, I'm still referring to Larry, but also you as well, Keith. I just felt like the current writers of New Trek, they really have trouble with ensemble pieces. We're going to talk about it when we get into Section 31 as well.
Part of that, unfortunately, is the nature of having only 10 episodes to do per season, so there's a limit.
But also, I think, and I wonder if, from a budget standpoint, if a lot of these actors are under the 5-line and less pay rate, I don't know, but it really just seemed like there's ciphers, and it's like, no, this was the problem in Next Generation's first season, the problem was, was the planet problem of the week, and it's like, again, Michael Piller's like, hey, we got a crew. Let's have a Worf story. Let's have a Troy story. And you can still do that. And there are these B and C stories, but I'm sorry, they don't know how to write that stuff. In my opinion,
I don't agree. The bridge crew didn't get much to do. Yes, but you still got plenty for Stamets to do, plenty for Tilly to do, plenty for Culber to do. It was just a different set of characters that were being focused on. And you still got, God knows, plenty for Saru and Burnham to do. And Pike while he was there, and Lorca when he was there.
Yes,
it was just a different set of characters to focus on. I thought it worked. Yes, the bridge crew was underserved, and it would have been nice to have gotten. And the bits they did get were all really good. I loved, like, when they visited Earth for the first time after they'd come to the future.
That was interesting.
Finding the tree they all sat in at the academy. That was a lovely moment. And the way they all helped take the ship back from the Emerald Chain. That was, it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
No, the shows, no, they're not perfect, but neither were the other shows. There's a tendency to
You're right.
lionize the previous shows to a degree that they didn't do at the time the show was on the air. I mean, the same complaints were being made about Discovery in 2017 and 2018 that were being made about Enterprise in 2001 and 2002, and yet the people making the complaints about Discovery are saying it's not like the good old days like when Enterprise was on the air. It's like,
you're right.
No,
that's fair. And the first season of the first season of Next Gen as well.
Yeah, there was a huge contingent of the fan base who were like, you can't do Star Trek without Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. How dare you?
And Deep Space Nine, its first couple seasons as well.
And it's just, honestly, one of because I've been following Star Trek since birth.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
And
that's what I'm targeting.
Just seeing the same complaints come around again, and it's just like, come on, guys, this is. And I don't agree with Larry on that, by the way. But
I do think that TOS is probably the best, or season 2 of TOS is the best of those seasons.
Maybe.
And there's a lot of, and in fact, I defend season 3 because everyone's like, oh, that's all crap. And it's like, actually, I can count at least 6 or 7 really great season 3 episodes.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Actually, the season 3 does get a bad rap. And some of it is deserved, but there's some good stuff in there. There were some very good episodes in there. And my favorite thing, actually, one of the things that I've been doing for the last 13 years, 14.
Tell me.
I've been writing about Star Trek for Reactor Magazine, what used to be Tor.com. They changed.
Oh, that's great, man. Oh, that's good to know because I was wondering what happened to Tor. So now it's Reactor.com.
It's called Reactor Magazine, ReactorMag.com. And that's where I'm doing my Babylon 5 rewatch. That's where I've been reviewing the new Star Trek shows for them since 2017. So whenever there's a new episode out, and I review it for them. And I've done rewatches of all the older series. So I did the original series, Next Gen, DS9, Voyager, Enterprise, and all the movies. And one of the things that struck me, I did my original series rewatch I did from 2015 to 2017. Okay. And watching the third season again, the thing that really jumped out at me was they did a really good job. There are two things that the season in general did well. One was give us some really alien-looking aliens. The Tholians, the Medusans, the Excalbians, they were all like much more alien. It wasn't just, people in makeup. And
what was the rock thing with Abraham Lincoln?
Yeah, that was the Excalbians.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, unbelievable. And really, again, they kept cutting, like a lot of shows. Batman suffered from this. They cut the budget.
Yeah, but that was one of the ways they took advantage of it. Like the Medusans, we couldn't even see them, which was a great way to deal, to do that. But also, interestingly enough, with the obvious exception of the final episode, the female characters were much stronger in the third season. You had Miranda Jones, you had the Romulan commander, you had a bunch of others.
Mira, the Lights of Zatar, wasn't that third season?
Mira Remain.
Yeah.
And Kang's wife Mara in Day of the Dove.
Very much so.
There were a lot more strong female characters, and perhaps not coincidentally in the one season of the show that wasn't actually showrun by Gene Roddenberry. And then, of course, it all gets flushed down the toilet in the last episode with Turnabout Intruder.
Yeah.
But there was absolutely some great stuff. Day of the Dove, I mentioned, is one of my favorite episodes.
Love that episode.
The Web.
Spectre of the Gun, which everyone's like, it's goofy, and it's like, again,
and that was another one where they took advantage.
A good solution.
Yeah, and that was one where they took advantage of the low budget.
Yes,
they made the low budget work for them there because it's obvious watching the third season that they only spent about $4.75 on each episode, but and the constant reusing of stock footage and such. But and that was something Fred Freeberger was famous for. I mean, he did it on Space 1999 too.
Unfortunately, that season 2 of 1999 was not as strong as the first season.
He was the guy you brought in when you wanted to come in under budget. But
yeah, for real. By the way, on YouTube, I've been watching so much Jerry Anderson stuff, and really because I'm fascinated by his career. Going from puppets to finally what he wanted to do really was live action. and just the only one I haven't really watched is Space Precinct from I think it was the 80s or 90s. That was pretty horrid. But no, I love Supercar and of course Stingray and Thunderbird certainly. But Space 1999, UFO is great.
Yeah.
UFO is great.
Yeah.
So yeah, man. Here, okay, Gert. Before we continue, because we promised everyone we will get to section 31. The reason why I didn't love Disco was it was so different from the Star Trek I knew. Klingons, Spock's half sister, and the story. Michael was 80% of the scenes, and it was all extreme. The Orville was more Star Trek, in my opinion, and we knew the career,
and also the Orville,
or the crew rather.
Yeah, I mean, the Klingons have been changed every single time they've been on screen. This is nothing new. And honestly, a lot of the actual world building they did the Klingons was actually, I thought, pretty good. The biggest mistake, honestly, was having them constantly talking in Klingon because of the action ground to a halt. You could read the subtitles twice by the time they finished their sentence. But
well, and also, I don't know why they felt that, and maybe it is this, because I've seen younger people go, well, the Klingons, the way they were, depicted, that's blackface. And it's like, no, that's alien makeup. And the problem was, as I understood, and maybe you know more, that originally maybe they were going to make the Klingons red, but it looked wrong in that 1966 color TV.
Yeah, it was good.
So they chose brown.
It would have been bright red because everything was in Technicolor. But
but that's the thing, and it's like no, and this, I mean, literally, and forgive the tangent, but it kind of reminds me of, well, baby, it's cold outside. That's a rape song, and it's like, no, it's a couple flirting with each other. And it really, I really, it is sometimes. And again, art is subjective. I understand that. But when it's like, well, that's why they did it. They were doing blackface. It's like, no, they really weren't. And I'm also, sorry you take that opinion. But
another reason why it looks more like blackface now is because you're watching it on high def, which was never meant to be watched in.
Fair enough. Absolutely. That's fair.
When I watched the 66 Batman as a kid, I could not see Cesar Romero's mustache. I watch it now on DVD or on my high def TV. You cannot miss Cesar Romero's mustache, and it's the same thing with a lot of the makeup stuff from the original series. It looks worse than it did originally on film, on crappy little cathode ray tubes than it does on high def, just because that's what they were filming for, and it makes it look worse than it is, and I can understand. People having a visceral negative reaction to it because they're not seeing it the way it was originally seen. But the Klingon makeup has been changed constantly. What it was in the movies wasn't the same as what it looked like in Next Gen. And then, they changed it again for the Bad Robot movies and again for Discovery. And they overdid a little on Discovery.
But at least in the case of Bad Robot, it was close enough to what we got on TV for
it was pretty similar to what they did on Discovery. The two they're not that far off.
I disagree, and again they did, and what they could have said ultimately too was, well, the Klingon Empire has a lot of planets. Maybe this faction is from a different planet or something. But also they made those ridiculous uniforms that it was hard enough for them to move, let alone fight in. And honestly, the other thing, Keith, is, and truly, I think Section 31 is also an example of this. These writers don't know how to write science fiction. They just don't.
I don't agree with that at all.
I think their ideas are paper thin, and I think and also again, the way they screw with canon. The reason why, if I may, and I feel free to disagree, but the reason why I think we still talk about Star Trek 58 years later is because everyone else, and I know that a lot of the stories are vetted. I imagine your stories were probably vetted by somebody at Paramount. Yeah. But my metaphor is they colored within the lines. They didn't stray that far from the basics. Star Wars is having the same problem. I mean, thank God, I think the most recent show, Skeleton Crew, managed to tell a different story, but it was still Star Wars. And some of the complaints about the other stuff is like, I don't know, man. I'm not feeling it. I don't
agree, partly because, honestly, for one thing, the fourth season of Star Trek Discovery is the most purely Star Trek season of TV show that has ever been done. Whether you think it was good or not is another thing. But what that story they told was Star Trek at its purest. That was about a problem that was solved, about seeking out a new life, a new civilization, about a species who was believed to be hostile but turned out not to be, which is That's the thing that makes Star Trek, and the thing that makes it different from everything else is that it's always about people. It's about compassion. It's about talking things out rather than winning because you could blow things up better than the other person. Whether it's going back to like the Corbomite maneuver on the original series where Kirk still showed compassion to Balok even though he nearly killed him.
Yes.
And that started a dialogue between the species. Whether it's the Dominion War ending not because of military might, but because Odo basically agreed to go back to be with the Great Lank. On Discovery, in their third season, the burn was solved by showing compassion to a 100-year-old kid and rescuing him.
That was a horrible story. It was a horrible story.
But,
the entire dilithium, gets inert throughout the quadrant because a little kid screams. Dumb. Really. And also, again, also they lean on, if I may, and again, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I do want a little back and forth. But they rely on, here's my weepy story. Here, I mean, we had it just now in 31. And also, by the way, please stop making augment/con stories.
Oh, God,
God. But yeah, let me tell you my truth. And also in the last season, they circumvented the point of the original Next Generation story about the chase, where the overarching theme from if they were the providers, I forget what the name of the race was, but they're like, even though we're all different, we all come from the same source. And it's a very 20th century American idea of, we come from different countries, we're all here to be Americans. We're really all, at the end of the day, we're all people. And in fact, the Romulan commander and Picard have that conversation. In the last episode of Discovery, the provider tells Burnham, you're an individual. We celebrate the individual, which is a very 21st century attitude, I think, in American society, that the individual is more important than the collective. And again, it's like, well, I guess, but again, no, that wasn't the original intent. And that kind of pissed me off, frankly.
The original intent of the chase was to explain why all the aliens were humans in makeup. I never liked that episode. That's all that was a way to explain that, and I just didn't see the point. The last season of Discovery, I had mixed feelings about. Also, I didn't think.
Well, but even the fourth season,
the fourth season I loved.
Well, but what drove me nuts was here was an opportunity with this weird anomaly. Okay, what do the Romulans think? And also, I hated the merging of the Vulcans and the Romulans. Oh, now it's Navarre. Bullshit. I absolutely love that. That was bullshit.
No, I disagree because that was Spock's goal.
I understand that was Spock's goal. I understand that.
That was allowing Spock's crazy ass plan to actually have come to fruition if it didn't in his own lifetime.
But they could have reached peace. They could have reached peace and acknowledged each other's kinship without that overt of a change.
I liked it
was unnecessary.
We're freaking 1,000 years in the future,
right? That's true.
Honestly, that's true. There needed to be more changes like that. I think they didn't go far enough. There should have been more stuff like Navarre.
Well, but I would have liked to have known more about what do the Ferengi think of this thing, whatever. Yeah. And all we got were a lot of background actors, and that poor Ferengi actor, who I imagine shows up in Vegas, he was just there, and literally he was like this the whole time.
Yeah,
and with his mouth open, and it's like, and thank God in the season 3 of Picard, we actually got an interesting Ferengi for a change, since Aaron
Sanford's character, I had problems with season 3 of Picard, but season 3 of Picard was fan service in search of a plot it never found. I loved what they did with. I loved what they did with the characters. I loved seeing the characters 20 years later and seeing how they changed, how they developed. LaForge basically turned into Bilbo Baggins. Who doesn't like adventures. They make you late for dinner. I'm just going to stay here and play with my ships. I liked the solution to how do we deal with the fact that Brent Spiner is old now. I love the way Worf developed. I love that Riker at this point in his career is what Picard was at the beginning of Next Generation. He's the veteran captain that you rely on. That was perfect. And all of that, but the plot was just so dumb. And
I agree with that. And also, again, here's the Borg again. And especially given what we got in the second season of Picard. And it's like, will you fucking leave? And also, All right, fine. You're dealing with the changelings. How did the changelings and the Borg get together? And also focus more on what the hell's happening with the changelings right now.
And what got me, and this has been my issue with the entire concept of Section 31, is that Section 31 is the thing that the Federation should be fighting against. It's the thing that our heroes should be fighting against and trying to get rid of. And they keep freaking bringing it back. I am abject in my love of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and of in general what they did. And I like the fact that the show built on what came before and didn't just accept the utopia, but challenged it.
Yes.
But still absolutely went along with it and just showed that it's something that needs to be challenged every once in a while and is worth fighting for.
Agreed. No, those conversations between Sloan and Bashir were that's classic Star Trek.
I hated it. Never should have been introduced in the first place. It was
well, and now they got black badges and they got to see our secret headquarters.
That's the thing.
Oh, sure.
Ever since DS9, several not just, and this isn't just on TV.
Did it bother you in Enterprise?
Also in the tie-in fiction, turned 31 into this huge thing, and it's a writer's crutch. It's a hey, we need to have our heroes do horrible things, but we can't have them do horrible things because it's Star Trek and it's the Federation. So let's bring 31 into it. And then we have this stupid movie.
Yes, indeed.
My review of it. The discussions you saw on Facebook grew out of the review I wrote for Reactor.
I respect that. No, I really want to read it now and everything. So again, Reactor Mag. I'm going to put a banner up.
ReactorMag.com.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to put up a banner up while we're talking.
Yeah,
keep going.
They're the ones I've got rewatches of all the older shows. I've got reviews of all the newer shows, including most recently Section 31, as well as each episode of Discovery, Strange New Worlds, Picard, Lower Decks. And also, I didn't do full episode by episode reviews of Prodigy, but I did do overviews of blocks of episodes of Prodigy, and also just last Friday the Section 31 review.
Okay.
But basically, my problem with it was that it wasn't. First of all, this didn't need to be a Section 31 story. It's Reactor, not Ractor.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll fix that. But keep going. But no, I agree with you. Yeah, I don't understand why this couldn't be a Starfleet intelligence.
Exactly.
Operation.
And because that's what it was. There was nothing about this that was, dirty tricks or black ops or anything like that. It was just an intelligence mission. It was basically a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movie, except nobody clung to the side of an airplane or ran very fast down a long, empty pathway.
No, they were flying on a platform, and as another reviewer pointed out, I know it was a cheap budget, but you couldn't afford a fan while they were fighting on that flying, which it clearly was just a green screen or the volume screen or whatever. And everybody's hair was just fine as, they're kung fu fighting. I'm like,
yeah.
And also, what was the name of the guy from the Mirror Universe that was Joe's former, what is it? Son.
Yeah.
Okay. Shouldn't Son, and also on the one hand, they wanted to make a movie that if you're a Michelle Yeoh fan, especially for what she's been doing the last couple of years, oh my God, Michelle Yeoh, hey, she's on a streaming movie. Well, I have Paramount. Let me check it out. Fine. But they set up that, and also another thing I hated about Discovery, Carl, the former city, the monolith city on the edge of forever donut that to the time portal. I understand that was the original concept that Harlan Ellison had for the character. Made no sense, but also, so he sends Giorgio back to the lost era between the last TOS movie and the beginning of Next Generation, and obviously we got a glimpse of that with yesterday's Enterprise and Rachel Garrett and everything. Mm-hmm. Other than Rachel Garrett being there, there's no reason, there's no acknowledgement of. They mention a star date, but it could have been anything.
The most useless dating tool in the world.
But also San, but San is from the 23rd century.
Right, he should have been a lot older.
Yeah. And again, maybe that's too confusing. But again, it goes back to the bad writing of this movie that clearly all they did was they took the cliff notes of what would have been an 8 or 10 episode series and crammed it into 90 minutes.
And this was
bad
very
writing.
a rewritten pilot.
Bad writing. really bad writing.
No, I
and
won't argue with you on
not enough agency to these
didn't-
other. Yeah,
Yeah.
not enough agency to these other characters. It's
Not enough
okay.
interest. They weren't they were all caricatures. They weren't. There was.
And they all had special skills potentially, but we didn't see him use them much.
Not
the Cameloid barely used his power. And also, it would have been nice to see more of the Delton other than 10 minutes.
Yeah. I thought she was cool, and then they kill her off to show that there are stakes. But
Yep.
And
also Giorgio in general. I'm going to give my editorial about Giorgio, and then I want to hear your opinion. Yeah. She's irredeemable, in my opinion. She is a genocidal cannibal that came over to the Prime Universe, and they tried to rehabilitate her, indoctrinate her into our ways or whatever. I'm not buying it. And also, the people are like, well, that last two-parter in season 3 really kind of showed that she learned. Well, clearly from Section 31, she hasn't learned a thing. And also, both in Discovery and 31, hey, you're not going to kill us, are you? Hey, here's to Giorgio. Yeah, she used to eat people like Saru, but she wasn't a bad lady. No, she's a really bad lady. Yeah. And I don't think a good idea to be your protagonist. Now, maybe if they made her the villain of a Section 31 movie, that might have been interesting. And I love Michelle Yeoh. It bums me out.
Yeah.
Please, your thoughts on Giorgio.
I'm right there with you. I mean, there are ways to have her be redeemed if they had kept her on Discovery, and they at least made some inroads toward it while she was there. But honestly, what I would have loved to have seen was her redemption arc is actually destroying Section 31 completely, but which would have been cool.
Sure.
The biggest problem is that they made a mistake from the very beginning. One of the things I resent about the first 2 seasons of Discovery is I was promised a show at the beginning of the Vulcan Hello and got a completely different one. One of my many problems with season 1 of Discovery in particular is that the actual story started in episode 3.
Yes,
that's
agreed.
In the first episode.
Agreed.
What happened in the opening 2-parter was backstory that we didn't need right away. That could have come later. It should have started with Burnham disgraced, being brought on by Lorca, and we fill in the other stuff as we go later.
That would have been a great idea. I agree with you.
Instead, we started with a completely different show. And I was much more interested in the adventures of Captain Georgiou and Commander Burnham and Lieutenant Commander Saru on the Shenzhou than I was in the adventures of Lorca's evil twin Skippy on Discovery. And again, the biggest one of the reasons why I like Discovery better when it moved forward, the biggest problem with on-screen Star Trek between 2001 and 2020 was that it was going backwards.
Agreed.
The Star Trek has been at its most successful when it moves forward. That's why the movies worked. That's why Next Generation, DS9, and Voyager worked. And it's why now Picard and Lower Decks and Prodigy and the future iteration of Discovery have worked. Yes, Strange New Worlds is wonderful, but that was a special case.
But they also, real fast regarding Strange New World, they have half of the original crew. And it's like, that's, as I've learned, and I love this phrase, plot armor. Nothing's going to happen to Scotty. Nothing's going to happen to Uhura, Spock. These people, because it's like, well, no, they got another 5 minutes.
Yeah, you can still tell stories in that setup.
Absolutely.
I mean,
yes, you can.
There are ways to make a prequel work. Better Call Saul being a prime example.
Absolutely.
And so far, I think Stranger Worlds has done a good job, especially because there are characters that we don't know what's going to happen to them, like number one, like Lon, Telia.
But again, Lon does not need to have been the descendant of.
The obsession with the eugenics wars is
it's a disservice
ridiculous.
It's a disservice to what potentially could have been it. And again, as they did in Section 31, one of the few things I did like is like, all right, well, at least it's not a descendant and whatever. But also that doesn't make sense because in Strange New Worlds, they pushed Khan's story to the 21st century.
Well, they kind of had to.
But this augment is like, well, in the 90s, all this stuff happened. And it's like, wait, and also in Picard season 2, there was the Project Khan file and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, man. These guys don't even pay attention to their own canon. The changes they've... Yeah, Keith, you can say, but again, there's a reason why 58 years later, we love the history of Star Trek and the history, their fake history of that reality.
Most of it has been pretty consistent. No, it's not perfect, but it's not... I don't think any of the changes are most of the stuff the big picture stuff is still pretty consistent for the most part.
Spock's sister, and that's another thing.
Okay, no,
please,
I'm definitely arguing with you on that.
By all means, buddy. I got no problem with that. Please, I want to know.
The fact that Spock's father was a famous ambassador was something he didn't tell anybody until he was standing next to him on the Enterprise. The fact that he had a half-brother was something he didn't tell anybody until he was standing next to her on the Enterprise.
Very true.
Didn't tell anybody in Kirk's crew that he was engaged to Pring until she made a phone call to him. An open book Spock ate. I didn't have any problem with that at all. And honestly, it gave us certain things like, for example, in the episode Letha, where we found out that Sarek was told by the Vulcan High Command that only one of your experiments, which I love that line, only one of your experiments will be allowed into Vulcan Space School.
Right, the Science Council. Yeah.
Right. And that was beautiful. That's the sort of thing that a prequel can do well when it's done right. Because one thing that always bugged me, going back to the original series, was Sarek giving Spock, not speaking to Spock for 20 years because he's joined Starfleet.
Yep.
That's not a very Vulcan thing to do, it seems to me. That there's no logic in that, in bringing you up to do what your daddy done. But what Discovery did was provide a different context for it. Spock, of course, didn't know that Sarek was given that choice, that you could only send one of your kids. And he chose Spock, and then Spock rejected it. And of course, him not telling Spock that was the source of it, just made it so much more interesting.
Well,
I loved that.
Well, if I may, about Sarek, because again, the way Discovery treated Sarek, I objected to, because not so much that stuff, and that's a legitimate thing to bring up, but there's that great moment at the end of Star Trek IV where Mark Leonard and Nimoy are having the conversation, and he says, if I remember correctly, I was against you joining Starfleet. Yeah. These associates of yours, they're of good character. And Spock goes, they're my friends. And Sarek bristles in that great country club Vulcan sort of way of, oh yeah, that human bullshit again. And he's like, yes.
Yeah.
Now cut to Discovery and Sarek with Burnham. He is a nurturing father. Very un-Vulcan. Well, that was the vibe I got.
I didn't get a nurturing father vibe off him.
He seemed amused by Burnham. He was very proud of the fact that she followed in his footsteps. And honestly, mentioning Sybok, and when they showed Sybok in Strange New Worlds, I want a flashback scene before Strange New Worlds ends of Burnham, Sybok, Spock, Sarek, and Amanda. I want a dinner scene of them arguing human philosophy versus Vulcan. Sybok and Amanda are all about, the emotions. There's something to be said about that. And Sarek and Burnham, no. Logic dictates everything. Yeah. And Spock's watching a tennis match and doesn't know what to think. And I also don't like. What's that?
It could still happen. We still got.
I hope it does. Because make Sybok my edict to Strange New Worlds after they showed him. Fine. And also, I had the pleasure of interviewing Lawrence Luckenbill, and I'm so glad I did, because he's amazing. Yeah. And really that was a thankless job, because you're right. Yes. It's that terrible soap opera. Well, here's that brother you never knew about. Da-da-da. And it's like
a terrible movie. I mean,
again, I'll defend, because you think it's worse than 31, right?
I mean, in the same way that, one root canal is worse than three root canals is worse than one root canal.
But at least when Kirk is like, you're lying. I've known you forever. You never talked about a brother. Well, you don't have a brother. Technically, you're right. I don't have a brother. I have a half brother. He's like, I got to sit down, because that was the entire audience going, all right, we got to sit down. What the fuck's going on? And that's great. I appreciated that moment of fourth wall humor of, all right. But also,
and again, like I said, that's in character for Spock. He doesn't share.
Larry, I want to acknowledge you're saying great shit in the chat, but we're moving at the speed of light, and you're still like on things that we but again, I really appreciate your passion, and I just want you to know I'm reading this stuff. People that will see this video will read your stuff, and really, you're making great points. For a second, I thought about calling Larry, because Larry comes on my show, I come on his show. And that's great. And he's my God, he's a Captain Ron Tracy fan from
he's the
from the Omega Glory. And it's great. And he even has that fantastic insignia that is that rectangle that isn't a Starfleet icon and everything.
Yeah.
So that's funny. And he goes, "Oh, this is great." He says, "I'm just writing this stuff down so his co-host John Price and I can talk about this." I totally hear you, Larry.
Yeah.
I so hear you, man. But no, back 31. It's again what they should have forget. And I really want to know what you think. These are movies, and they're basically long bottle. They are potentially bottle shows. They don't have the normal budget. Fine, tell a smaller story. The thread of the galaxy does not have to be in every goddamn story. Yeah. Jesus. And it's like, I was really hoping for a focused Giorgio. It could have been a much smaller caper and just, all right, fine, we're doing whatever. And I love your idea of, no, she really should have been like, all right, no, this is an evil organization. I know evil.
But I
Let's bring them down.
As soon as I saw Garrett was in it, it's like, okay, they're doing the Lost Era, so she can't possibly bring it down. I mean, honestly, that's what the story of season 3 of Picard should have been. When they found out the changelings were being tortured, they should have exposed that and brought, it's like, because that's part of what started the whole freaking plot, such as it was in Picard season 3.
Yep.
Yeah.
It sounds like I like it though better than you did 3 of Picard.
I mean, it was one of it's like a snack, you enjoy it while you're eating it, but it doesn't actually fill you up. I
thought there were some great character moments for our favorites.
And that's what I liked about it. What I loved the character stuff. I absolutely adored the character stuff. I just didn't like I thought the story was dumb.
No, it was a dumb plot. It really again, I think it points to they don't know how to write ensemble. I mean, I think Metalis of all the showrunners, I think has been the best so far. But also, I think these stories are simplistic, and you compare them to, and I know that they had 25 episodes a season, or a little more, or a little less back in the old days, and I know they only have 10. Well, then the onus is on you to make those 10 great. I think
that the Stranger Worlds and the later seasons of Discovery and also the 2 animated series have been shown.
2 animated series have been excellent.
Yeah.
And really, I didn't like Lower Decks because I really felt Mariner was another Burnham that could walk on water. And thankfully, it took him a season. But then it was like, hey, know-it-all? You don't know everything. And it was great to see the other 3 main characters laugh at her and not always listen to her, and the last 2 seasons were amazing.
Oh yeah, it got better when it stopped trying to be a 21st century office comedy, unconvincingly crowbarred into the 24th century, and just did a Star Trek comedy. As a Star Trek comedy, it was great.
Yes,
and I like the fact that they gleefully embraced all the more batshit elements of Star Trek and decided, yes, this is part of it. Let's run with it.
God, when they had the Orions and the Orions, and it's like,
oh, I love that.
Fantastic. No, Mike McMahon and company, and the Habermans and company with Prodigy, they get Star Trek. They color within the lines. I understand the feeling that Star Trek's kind of old hat. We want to appeal to a younger audience. Fine. I think those shows succeed in doing that.
Yeah.
And I think what they're doing with the gimmick episodes of Strange New Worlds, I hated that episode where Spock is suddenly human, and this teaser of what's coming up, that they make an ejection and they turn into Vulcans. Fuck you. And I'm not saying you, Keith. I'm saying them. Fuck you. That is just stupid, and it's cute and tee-hee. But this is why I believe that they're playing at Star Trek. They really don't know how to write real Star Trek.
I don't agree with that at all.
That's cool.
We're like I said, season 4 of Discovery was as pure a Star Trek as you'll see. I think what they've done on Stranger Worlds has also been very much in the spirit of what Star Trek is about. I think no, it's not perfect, but I mean, neither were all of the other shows.
No, you're right.
It's easy to look back on them now and remember the good stuff and forget some of the more embarrassing stuff that they did. But it's still. I still think that they're doing a generally good job.
I think having only 10 episodes.
Particularly, I want to come back to what you said about bringing to a younger audience. Okay. The Prodigy was supposed to be. That was what Prodigy was supposed to be, and it got screwed by the pandemic. It was originally supposed to debut on Nickelodeon,
right,
and it wasn't supposed to go to Paramount Plus until later. But then the pandemic hit, and they needed one of the things they realized was that they needed kids programming for Paramount Plus specifically because kids were stuck at home. And so it wound up being done completely back asswards, and then they decided to cancel it because they wanted a tax break, because that's what TV networks should be doing.
No, and I get that. I do understand. It sucks, but at least and hopefully, I don't know what I thought I've heard that there's going to be a season 3 of Prodigy. Maybe not.
I haven't heard one way or the other. That would be great.
Okay, but yeah, I mean, I really love what they did, and it's regardless of where it landed, it still was Star Trek, and it was was Star Trek 101. So if you never learned about Star Trek, just like these kids, here's how we learn.
That was the point of the show originally.
Yes,
was to do that.
And also in 31, as I'm sure you agree, and maybe not, but they have that area space that, all right, we can't go here, and then they show the map. Now you need HD and freeze frame to see. Oh yeah, there's Gideon, there's Orion, there's Beta Z.
There's a page right out of Star Charts. That looked like it was pulled from Jeffrey Mandel's old Star Charts book.
Could be, but again, and my fear is that, and of course the Sharon half white, half black character. Yeah. Hey, see, we know Star Trek. Here it is. Hey, you remember? Look, just like Frank Gorshin. Hey, look, it's a map, and it's got all these places. It's like they're not germane to the story, and all you're doing is it's the worst use of Easter eggs. See, we know what we're doing. No, you really don't. Because again, as you know,
one of the things that always bugged me on the 90s on Next Generation and DS9, they kept making up new aliens instead of using some of the older ones more often. Discovery and Stranger Worlds have been good about reusing ones that we've only seen briefly once, and if that matter, Prodigy and Lower Decks did too. Is taking some of the species that were only introduced once and actually bringing them back occasionally, which is why I didn't have a problem with the Charon at all.
I did. I'm sorry when they underline they were wiped out. There's only these two guys left, and I understand
they were a spacefaring race. The notion that they were all wiped out is ridiculous.
That's fine, but again. We didn't see him for decades, and now all of a sudden here they are. And that one guy.
It's only one guy.
That man, maybe that would have been explored had they had a full season. But frankly, I don't think they had enough story. And I've heard mixed things. I've also heard that what the Section 31 movie represented was half the season and not the full season and everything. And even that the guy with the appliances on his face was only going to be in 1 or 2 episodes anyway. Right. But it's just, I'm sorry, they're shitty writers. They suck.
I first of all, you're talking about at least a couple of people who are friends of mine and who I know. So I really.
Well, I'm sorry, and I don't mean to disparage them in a personal way. And I don't know. Ideas are also submitted. And ultimately, it is the producer that decides we're going with idea A, not idea B. Because I do know knowledgeable people who have written for New Trek that do know their stuff. Yeah. But I'm not seeing it reflected in the new product.
I don't agree. I mean, I think saying the entire writing staff sucks because of one crappy movie is ridiculous.
But I feel that way about a lot of New Trek.
Okay.
And that's why, like I said, the Spock turning human episode was just a bad I Dream of Jeannie or Bewitched plot of, oh my God, nobody else knows what's happening, but we do in the audience. And isn't this crazy? And it's like, I didn't turn on I Dream of Jeannie. I turned on Star Trek. And also I hate the way they treat Spock. Spock is a freshman at a new school that, Spock, you just don't understand humans. And also this conflicting idea of we're very representational, we're very respective of color and orientation and everything else. And then M'Benga is the guy that gives Spock his Vulcan harp. Isn't that cultural appropriation? I'm sorry. I don't buy that. I don't buy that M'Benga is the guy that, here's an idea.
M'Benga was already somebody who interned on Vulcan. I mean,
but again, I don't buy, I like the way in the animated series and prior to Discovery and Strange New Worlds, Spock was a guy that, and even in the Cullen movies, I will buy that young pre-teenage Spock got a lot of shit on Vulcan for being half human.
Yeah.
But I also think that much as M'Benga, studied it on Vulcan, that Spock studied in San Francisco. And yes, there's a Vulcan Academy or a Vulcan complex at Starfleet Academy in San Francisco. I don't believe that Spock is that awkward. And also as a human mother, I don't believe he's this awkward with humans the way they portray him. And they've chosen, it's a choice. And I like Ethan Peck. I really like it. And I think there's potential. And I think he's grown into the character as it's gone on.
There's also I mean, you have to also show. I think we're seeing is consistent with what we saw Nimoy doing in 10 years of story time later. That this was the beginning of his development
journey. Yeah.
And you have to keep that in mind. And I think Peck has done a really good job of being Nimoy-esque without just aping his performance.
Completely agree.
Which Zachary Quinto did in a completely different way in the Bad Robot movies.
Agreed with that as well.
Honestly,
that was a missed opportunity.
Stranger Worlds is one of those things that like it goes against my original argument, but if you had told me before 2019 that there would be a Captain Pike show, I would say why. We already got the Captain Pike show; they just renamed him Kirk. And then season 2 of Discovery happened, and Anson Mount was so good, and even
he's amazing,
and Rebecca Romijn was so good. And I'm like, fuck, I need a Pike show. So they've been giving us that, and the one of the things that I've also really enjoyed about the current crop of shows is that most of the actors on this are fans. I way back in 2018, maybe, I was a guest at a convention at Planet Comic Con out in Kansas City.
Yeah.
And Sonequa Martin Green was also one of the guests.
Cool.
And I gave her a copy of the coffee table book I did, The Klingon Art of War.
Oh, that's great.
Which by the way was like when they were doing the After Trek thing during the first couple seasons of Discovery, like they had some books out, and that was one of the ones they had out. Which was
fantastic!
But I gave her a copy of the book, and later on she was in the green room eagerly flipping through it and seeing how cool it was.
That's fantastic.
I've talked with Anthony Rapp and a couple of the other actors, and with Anson Mount and with Ethan Peck. These are guys who we've been guests at the same conventions, and I've talked to them. And these guys are legitimately, Doug Jones also, serious fans of Star Trek, and they are thrilled at the fact that they get to do it. One of the other things, and whatever else one can say about Discovery, it gave us Saru, who is such a perfect Star Trek character.
I like Saru.
He is absolutely wonderful and definitely in the upper echelon of cool Star Trek characters that we've gotten over the years.
I'll give you that.
Like Spock, like Data, like the EMH.
Plus, I always root for Doug Jones anyway because he's always great.
He's such a sweetheart.
That's awesome. And by the way, I did this past summer. I at Terrificon. I got to do a DS9 panel with Nana Visitor, Armin Shimmerman, and Andy Robinson.
Nice.
Had them all separately as well on my show. Right. And then I did a Strange New Worlds panel with Ethan and Celia. And I asked them, and now I ask you, is Starfleet a military organization?
Of course it is.
Well, it was first of all, I said that, and the crowd went, ooh. And I'm like, oh, I love that reaction from the crowd. Ethan looked at me like, are you trying to start a fight? And I'm like, listen, there's no right answer to this. I just want to know your opinion.
No, there's completely a right answer to this. It is a military organization. The reason it's a military organization is that it has a rank structure and it has courts and it has court-martial proceedings to enforce its own regulations. That's all military means. The real question is Starfleet a militaristic organization, which it isn't.
I agree with that as well. Yeah. I always said they're like the Coast Guard or the Peace Corps.
Exactly.
And in terms of their altruistic attempts to get people to join the Federation. One of Larry's old co-hosts is like, no, all the Federation wanted was everybody's dilithium, which cracked me up. And I'm like, no. I'm like, come on, man. You got to put it in 1966 context. Yeah. They're the Peace Corps, man. Yeah. They're like, hey, we're here to help you. What can we do to help you? Let's help you get clean water. Let's, maybe you've got disease. We've got medicine, whatever.
But it's also, one of the biggest inspirations Roddenberry had was the Horatio Hornblower books.
Yes, which are great.
It's the British Navy of the.
Well, like I said, Ethan said no, it's a group of scientists. Celia said no, it's a military organization. I love that whether she believed it or not, she was the second person to answer. Yeah. Which is great. And I'm like, okay, that's always again. Yeah. I'm not here to argue with you. I just want to know what your feelings are.
And they're both right. But they're both right. It is a bunch of scientists.
Of course, but also another kernel of, again, the writing today, the captain's word should be the final word. And too many junior officers are, all right, I'm the captain, let's turn left. No, captain, and including Burnham when she was a junior officer.
I'm sorry, did you watch Next Generation ever?
When did they openly defy Jean-Luc Picard? Help
Worf
me
did
out,
all the
Pete.
time. Riker did occasionally. Well, Riker usually kept it in private, but
Well, and again, it's my job as the first officer to offer opinion,
but,
and
I mean,
also the Jellicoe, like the Jellicoe thing's a different thing, where he was openly insubordinate, and I understand, but honestly, it wasn't until that terrible last episode of the first season of Strange New Worlds when it was It's a Wonderful Life, and let's see what if Pike does let these kids know, hey, you better not join Starfleet or this is going to happen, where he finally told Erica, shut up. I don't want to hear your opinion. I'm the goddamn captain. This is what we're doing. And it's like, I've been waiting for that for 9 goddamn episodes. These people, and again, I think it is this current cultural moment of, because and again, this is the old man yelling from his porch at clouds, but I see a lot of young people that are like, well, I want more agency in my entry-level job and be able to dictate what I do. And it's like, it's an entry-level job. You're a subordinate to the captain. You may not agree with the captain. Captain's word is, and really, there were times with Burnham where it's like that. And in fact, we saw her get sent to the brig in the Vulcan hello and everything. But it's like, oh, you disagree? That's really interesting. Shut the fuck up and leave the bridge because you have no business being here. And no, it's like, well, everybody should have their say and, girl power and all this other stuff. And it's like, I'm all for, I always point to Voyager because people are like, well, you obviously have a problem with women in charge. No, I really don't, because there were a lot of strong women on Voyager and there were a lot of strong women on Deep Space Nine. And yet there was still room for strong men as well. And it didn't become the girl show. And then, again, I also honestly was thrilled with that. Oh, great. We're going to have a trans person. We're going to have a non-binary person and they're going to be a couple. Okay, great. They made the non-binary person a Trill or rather hosting a Trill symbiote. And it's like, well, because she's human or whatever, she can't connect to her past lives. Well, that's what makes the Trill interesting. So you've cut off that. And she spent those 3 seasons. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know. Yes, you can. Oh, I guess I can. And they all congratulate each other whenever they do their job. Good work, people. And it's like, that's their job. Okay? I mean, I'm glad that we got out of that jam, but quit fucking congratulating them every goddamn time. And Gray, I'm sorry. Other than the relationship, and her conversation or their conversations with Zora, the computer, I'm like, why is this person on the ship? I'm sorry, I don't see a need. Well, and it would have made more sense if this person was
just there to do what they did. But
I thought it was a mistake. Again, hey, that's great. You have representation, but if this were a board game, all right, you made it past square one. What else is what are they bringing to the mission? Not much.
I disagree. I think that the thing that I enjoyed most about Discovery was I mean, all of Star Trek has always had characters who science the shit out of stuff. And Discovery was practically the entire crew. One of the things I loved was, these are people who genuinely wanted to try to figure out how to solve problems. Saru, Tilly, Stamets, Jet Reno, and Adira. And when they did that, when they had them, all brainstorming on different things, I loved that. I love that whole dynamic on the show. It's one of the things I loved about early Voyager, and it's one of the things that pissed me off that they moved away from as Voyager went on, was you had Janeway and Torres doing that.
Agreed. Well, and also Torres was a Maquis, so I initially, and so I do and also Klingon, so I did appreciate that. But again, never to the point of and even I'm glad you mentioned Tilly, because in that last season with the guy that the other captain that became the first officer, and basically she's like, "You're an asshole," and it's like, "Oh, that's really interesting. Why don't you're confined to quarters, and maybe you should not talk to me like that."
No, but she did that. She did that in the context of a conversation where he was asking for feedback.
But there was some sort of like permission to speak freely, and he's like, no, or whatever. You did kind of. I had to have that
character because I believe it is a rule that every show filmed in Canada has to have Callum Keith Rennie show up at some point.
I love him. I've loved him. He was amazing in Galactica. Yeah. And truly, I liked his character in that last season of Discovery.
And that was another case. That was another case that I liked, that they didn't just make up another alien. That was an alien we had actually seen on like one episode of Deep Space Nine.
Right.
And I'm glad. One of the things I really like is that the current shows, all of them, have been actually making use of existing species. There was one episode of Discovery that made use of a species that only showed up on like 2 episodes of Enterprise.
But I didn't like. I got to be honest. I don't like the Gorn turning into.
Oh no, I hate that.
Thank you. All right, good deal, Keith.
No, that we definitely agree on that one. That has been the biggest misfire of Strange New Worlds.
They could have made it, and they could have made a new species.
It should have been the Zenkethi. That's been my argument all along. We don't know anything about the Zenkethi except that they're old enemies of the Federation. We never saw them. We don't know anything about them. This would have been perfect.
I love it.
Yeah.
Why weren't you in the writer's room? Come on, man.
I don't write for television.
Is that a conscious effort?
It's not something I'd have to actually break into television, which is more effort than I'm willing to go to at 55.
I respect that. No, you're right. Absolutely.
And at least up until the last few years, you had to live in Los Angeles if you wanted to break into.
Very true too.
Yes. That's less true than it used to be, especially with the stuff like what we're doing. But
yeah, that's true. But also, my God, I feel for every current television and film writer. Yeah. And I mean, my God, these corporations that own the IPs now, they're just another widget that they sell. If they sold office furniture and made billions and decided to get in the TV business, they're treating it like, well, I don't understand why you need 20 writers. Well, yeah, you don't understand because look at the shitty product we're getting instead.
And decisions are not being made based on, the half the reason why Discovery and Lower Decks were canceled after 5 seasons, so they wouldn't have to spend more money on it. And they
wasted money on this Section 31 movie.
They were already committed. That was already a commitment, and they had to do something.
Was it or wasn't it? Because they gave Michelle Yeoh $12 million to make the goddamn thing.
Yeah, and the thing's been in development for 5 years.
And I realized that, but I also, when she won the Oscar, I'm like, well, kiss that. Obviously, kiss that series goodbye. Yeah. I give her credit for wanting to come back and liking the character, I guess, and maybe the potential of the character, but. I again, it was such a poor execution. And the other fear that I have is that maybe in a corporate way, they're going to go, oh, well, this movie failed. We don't want TV movies. The public doesn't want TV movies. And that would really be stupid.
In the abstract, it's a great way to tell, specific stories that don't need an entire series, but would make for,
yes,
without having to deal with the commitment of pulling together a whole Jagunda theatrical release, but
and also just the cheapness. That ship that Sun had, it's like, isn't that the La Serena? Slightly like with a little bit of mouse work of all right, erase some lines and stuff. Again, nothing said Lost Era, nothing other than Rachel Garrett being there, and Rachel Garrett was a missed opportunity too, because we all want to know more about Rachel Garrett, but fine. You want to keep Jamie Lee Curtis as a surprise at the end, fine. Have her talking to a voice like Raffi talking to Worf before they revealed Worf, and have her talking to a computer and check in with Starfleet. And all right, this is what you need to do. Barely anything other than the
voiceover at the beginning. But
crap.
Yeah. Ugh. I would like to change the subject briefly, just because we're coming up on something that I want to make sure people know about.
Please.
At the end of this week, on January 31st, we're going to be launching a Kickstarter for a Green Hornet anthology.
I'm aware, and I'm ready with the image. Boom.
Yes, there it is. It's called Detroit Noir City, as you can see. That cover is by Matt Wagner. And
that's great, man! Fantastic.
Yeah. And Timothy Zahn, Kevin J. Anderson, Bill Willingham, myself, Mary Fan, Matthew Baugh, Megan Mackey, Samiko Solson, Kim May, Michael Haspel, and one of the last stories, unfortunately, done by James A. Moore before he passed away last year.
Oh, wow.
And then Paul Jenkins and Peter J. Wax are writing the introduction as well.
Oh, that's great. I love Paul. Paul's a good friend.
Yeah. And
give people the title of your story.
The title of my story is this is a childhood dream come true. Is growing up watching the old Van Williams Bruce Lee show, and listening to the radio shows on old sets back in the day. But the story focuses specifically on Chinatown and the growing martial arts interest in this country that you saw in the late 60s and early 70s. And the show the story is called, inevitably, Everybody Was Kung Fu Fighting. Which is like, I couldn't resist. I had to
outstanding.
Do it.
Absolutely. I'm excited for this. I really am, man.
I've been training in martial arts for 20 years now. I'm a 4th degree black belt currently.
Oh wow.
And Bruce Lee is one of the reasons why you walk through any city and or suburban town and you see 15 karate dojos is because of Bruce Lee. That a lot of them are ones that grew up around that time. Thank you, Hamza. Yes. Like I said, I couldn't resist. But I also made use specifically of the history of Chinatown of Detroit's Chinatown and how it got changed in the late 50s and early 60s when the interstate went through and literally cut right through Chinatown, which is something I'm familiar with living in New York because the same thing happened when they built the Cross Bronx Expressway.
Robert Moses and all the changes to New York. Absolutely, man. Yeah.
And that had a big effect on Detroit's Chinatown. And I played.
Sure. No, that's a great idea, man. That's an excellent idea.
And working in a lot of martial arts philosophy. It was a lot of fun.
And listen, Moonstone, they're friends of mine. They literally were among my first guests of Word Balloon because Joe Gentile and Lori have just been good friends that way.
Yeah.
And they've done a great job with the Green Hornet license over the years, and a lot of great prose books that they've made, and also their Kolchak stuff has been great.
Yeah.
They really give a damn about the licenses they work with, and they get great people like yourself and the list of people that are involved with this book. And I'm thrilled, and really, Keith, and I'm happy to transition in a lot of your other stuff. So if you want to say more about the Green Hornet book in specific, but I do want to talk about, you just did a Sherlock Holmes story, you did a Zorro story in the last couple of years, and also I know you got a new thing a new original thing that you got brewing as well. But continue.
The other thing I want to say just about the Hornet Anthology, the Kickstarter is launching this week. You can go there. If you go to the Kickstarter and just search for the Green Hornet, you'll find it. And you can be alerted when it goes live. There's going to be some nifty little rewards and such. But it's a wonderful anthology. There are stories that focus on some of the side characters. Like mine really focused a lot on Kato. Mary Fan's story focuses on Casey.
Sure. Who from the newspaper. Sure.
Yeah.
Is there a Mike Axford story in there?
I'm not sure. I haven't read the whole book. I just know Mary's a friend of mine, so I know what.
Dude, I love that season.
And Sneeko Salson's story actually works in the riots that happened in the race riots that happened in Detroit in the late 60s.
Wow.
Her story ties into that. And we're the stories all take place basically like right after the TV show, and explicitly having it all take place in Detroit. Detroit's the city where the Hornet debuted. It was on,
right. George Trendle, WXYZ.
Right. Same station gave us the Lone Ranger.
Absolutely, man. And Sergeant Preston, Challenge of the Yukon. But it's funny. One of my best friends in radio is a woman named Laura Trendle. And I'm like, are you related to George Trendle? And she said, no, but I've heard that. And she goes, maybe way, way back, but certainly not my direct family. Because I was like, oh, that's amazing. This guy really was like, he's kind of a nerd god, like creating these fantastic properties. And I love that the Lone Ranger is the great granduncle of the Green Hornet.
Yes.
And I also did you read those Now comics back in the 90s?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
My God, I have that hardcover collection of the first few issues. And Ron Frontier, who wrote those stories and stuff, I've talked to him about it. And it's like, man. And also, I loved that generationally. This is something for you to look for, everybody, in the dollar bins, that they made the Radio Hornet the uncle of the Van Williams Hornet. Right. And that there really was this legacy. And also the Katos were a legacy as well. And it worked. It really worked because you almost had like a Justice Society Green Hornet and your Silver Age, your Silver Age Green Hornet and everything. And Matt Wagner, I'm glad he did the cover because I really appreciated his Green Hornet stories that he was doing for Dynamite back in the day. So
that was why they asked him. It's frustrating because the 2011 movie, the script was actually a good Green Hornet script, but Seth Rogen was completely wrong to play. Seth Rogen, the screenwriter, and Seth Rogen, the producer, did a good job, but Seth Rogen, the actor, screwed it up.
I agree. I agree.
That could have been a really good reboot.
Because that actor who played Kato was outstanding.
Oh yeah, he was fantastic.
So
the other stuff I've been doing a bunch of Sherlock Holmes stuff lately, both the canonical Sherlock Holmes and a version of a pastiche of Sherlock Holmes that I've been doing. I've done 4 stories now with Shirley Holmes and Jack Watson in modern day New York.
Fun.
And the conceit of those stories is that it's rewritings of Arthur Conan Doyle stories in modern New York.
Terrific.
So I did 2 stories in 2017 and 2018 for a couple of anthologies that had the titles Baker Street Irregulars, which were all alternate takes on
Cool.
on Sherlock Holmes.
That's cool.
A bunch of other really cool people contributed to that, including David Gerald.
Amazing.
And Caitlin Rozakis and a bunch of other people. And then just in the last few months, late last year, there was an anthology called Multiverse of Mystery, which was published by the International Association of Media Tie-in Writers, which was also alternate takes on Holmes. And I did another Shirley and Jack story for that. And then we've got an anthology coming out. The ebook's out now. The print book will be out in February, called Eliminate the Impossible, which is 4 more alternate takes. It's me, Christopher Abbott. Christopher Abbott's actually the one publishing these. He's been doing his own new Holmes and Watson stories called the Watson Chronicles. And he's also been doing some anthologies as well. And also Derek Tyler Attico, who wrote the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko that came out last year.
Oh, yeah, which was great. Yeah.
And Mary Fan, who's also in the Green Hornet anthology, did a story for it as well. And the story for Eliminate the Impossible I'm particularly pleased with. It's called A Scandal on 47th Street. And it has Shirley and Jack dealing with a guy named Ira Adler. Since I already gender flipped Holmes, I figured I'd gender flip Adler too. I had a lot of fun with that.
That's excellent, man. I haven't watched last night the new Watson show.
I haven't yet watched it either. But...
You know, I was really of two minds about Elementary because I love the Cumberbatch show so much. And it really kind of, first of all, irked me that initially CBS was going to license the Sherlock idea of the BBC and Cumberbatch. And instead they're like, somebody's like, Holmes is public domain and we can do whatever the fuck we want. Yeah. Oh, never mind. And then, and really, it's so weird because I haven't minded, I forget the name of the Netflix series where it was Holmes's younger sister or whatever.
Oh yeah. I can't remember her name.
Zelda Holmes, whatever her name was.
Yeah.
But when Lucy Liu showed up and your father contacted me, he wants me to help you with your drug addiction. I'm like, okay, whatever. I am intrigued. I am intrigued by this Watson show. Yeah. And a good friend of mine is writing on the show, so I am rooting for the show to be good.
I do want to check it out. I liked Elementary because I thought one of the things that's interesting to do when you're updating Holmes like that is what do you focus on? And if Holmes did some of the stuff that he did then now, he would go into rehab.
You're right. Oh no, you're right. Well, and even in Sherlock, they had that great scene at the crack house,
right?
Where yeah. So I get it. No, and also I like I said, I don't know. And again, maybe because they've been doing it for so long. Did you ever see that movie from the 70s with Joanne Woodward and George C. Scott? They Might Be Giants.
Yeah.
I love that movie. And in that, for people who haven't seen it, you really ought to find it. And I think it's on YouTube, the whole movie, because I think it's one of those orphan movies that for whatever reason they never put on DVD. But it's a guy who thinks he's Sherlock Holmes. Mm-hmm. And Joanne Woodward is a psychologist that's there to help him. And he just assumes she's Watson.
Yeah.
And it's a very sweet comedy that actually has a nice little mystery that they're trying to find and everything. It's a great, great movie. And that's why, and I saw it as a kid, and maybe that's why I'm a little more forgiving about, because again, I'm a genre snob. I admit it.
Yeah.
But
I also got to write two stories of the canonical Holmes of in Victorian London. One was, it was Christopher Abbott, the guy who was publishing Eliminate the Impossible, has put out 3 Cases by Candlelight anthologies, and I'm in 2 of them.
Yes, I saw again on your old channel and stuff. I saw you reading those as well.
Yeah.
Is Rabbits Collective? Is that kind of like the Crazy 8 guys, like Friedman and those?
Chris is also part of Crazy 8.
Oh, great!
But these are things he publishes these himself.
That's cool. No, that's great. Are you part of
people,
Crazy 8? Have you done stuff with Crazy 8?
I've done some stuff for their anthologies. I thought so. I've written short stories for a bunch of their things, both short stories and also essays for some of the things they published as well.
That's great,
including the Joker book they did that Rich Hanley put together, and Lou Tambone, and some other stuff. The Batman 66 books, the Jim Beard.
Yes.
I did essays for all 3 of those.
Oh, that's great, man. No, that's really cool. And also,
I've done stories for a bunch of their things, including the Phenomenon's shared world thing that Michael Jan Friedman created.
Yes, I love that. What? Tell me about your Zorro story that you did.
I've done 2 Zorro stories actually. One came out back in 2011 from Moonstone when they had the license, and I was really proud of that one. Actually, it's one of my favorite short stories that I've written. It was actually the secret origin of Captain Monasterio, who was Zorro's biggest foe, and I had so much fun coming up with his backstory and why he is the way he is.
Sure, that's cool.
Basically, he's a second son. Which means he doesn't get to inherit anything, so he went into the military because it was either that or the priesthood, and also that, and also it occurred to me that he's a military officer. The reason why he goes after Zorro is because he was ordered to, The story actually had its genesis in one line of dialogue that popped into my head, which was Monasterio saying to Zorro, "While your mask frees you, my rank shackles me."
Interesting. Very cool.
And the second story I did came out about a year or two ago with Bold Venture Press, who now has the Zorro license, and it was called Zorro's Exploits. And the story I did was called A Lovely View, which basically has a guy, one of the Dons, trying to basically get an orphanage and a bunch of nuns to abandon a particular location so the Don can come in and buy it and give his wife a house with a nice view.
Hilarious. That's a great idea. Did you watch that Amazon import Zorro story that they had, a series that they had?
I haven't, no.
I was curious about that. By the way, Hamza, and I want to mention this, he wanted to tip your hat to you for writing one of his favorite Marvel Comics novels, Spider-Man Down These Mean Streets. Had no idea you did that, Keith. That's very cool.
That book originally came out in 2005. Titan has been reissuing a lot of the old Marvel novels that have been done over the years, including the ones I edited back in the 90s. And the Down These Mean Streets was one I did in 2005 for Simon & Schuster. And Titan put out an omnibus that has that. Jim Butcher did a Spider-Man novel called Darkest Hours. And then Christopher L. Bennett, who's mostly a Star Trek novelist, did a Spider-Man novel called Drowned in Thunder. All 3 of those books are collected into a single volume.
When you edited back in the 90s, did you edit, was it Will Murray who did that great Shield paperback?
That was one of the last ones that was done, and I had left the company by the time his. So I didn't work on that. I think I was the one who hired him to do that, but I didn't actually get to work on the book.
Okay, that's a great Shield story.
That was part of the same line, yeah.
And I mean, truly, I have a lot of respect for you guys that will adapt stories from existing IPs, and I love going to San Diego and going to that panel where you guys all just give each other awards and the best,
the Scribe Awards,
the Scribe Awards, fantastic, man, and really Max Allen Collins, Marv Wolfman, John Mayberry, and all these people, and Mike Friedman, who I've had that on the show many times, and I love what he does. This is why I'm glad that we're talking again. No, really, man, it's tough to do a story of an existing IP and finding these kernels of stories that aren't explored, and that you guys do them well. And again, not to continue to pound on New Trek, but it's like all these guys would have to do is, and I know like David Mack, not the Marvel artist and writer David Mack, but the other David Mack that writes novels. I know he was a consultant on a lot of New Trek stuff. So, again, I don't know how much he's listened to and what the final decisions are.
I can tell you exactly. Actually, one of the people who's very heavily involved in the current shows is Kirsten Beyer, who's written about
Great Voyager books. Yeah, Great Voyager books. Yes,
Kirsten actually co-created Star Trek Picard, and she has been a producer on Picard, on Discovery, on Strange New Worlds. I think she's part of the Academy show. That's coming up.
Okay.
She was the one who brought in Dave. Was a consultant. David Mack was a consultant. By the way, Dave's one of my best friends. He's a hell of a wedding parties. Dave was a consultant on the first season of both Lower Decks and Prodigy. He was not brought back for either of the show's subsequent seasons for financial reasons. Basically, they no longer had the budget for a consultant for season 2. But he was responsible for a lot of cool things that were done on both shows. In particular, at the end of season 1 of Lower Decks, we saw the USS Titan for the first time. Riker's ship. Now, in the tie-in fiction, we actually had Simon and Schuster did a line of Star Trek Titan novels.
Love those novels, yes.
And they had a contest to design the ship.
Oh, wow.
And it was won by a guy named Sean Tarango. And at Dave's suggestion, they used Sean's design when
that's great.
It showed up on the animated series.
That's great.
Which was
very,
great.
very cool. That's very, very cool.
Yeah. They didn't use his design on Picard season 3, which annoyed me. Although they did actually have in one of the little shots of different starships, there was a USS Tarango, which was sort of a little tribute.
Oh, that's cute. That's all right. And at least they explained that. All right, I love in the comics.
It was a new type. It was a different ship, which was fine. But I wish that I would have much rather seen Sean's design in live action. Given that you've done Spider-Man and the amount of Star Trek you've done, I mean, I think IDW is doing a hell of a job with the Star Trek license. Yeah. And I really Cantwell and Lanzig and Kelly, they're incredible writers, and they really, really love Star Trek. And again, they are finding new things to say, but they color within the lines. Would you ever want to do? We have to color within the lines because if we don't, they say we can't do that. But
would you ever want to do
Heather Antos? I met her.
Heather's a great editor, absolutely,
yeah.
And I've loved her work since Marvel. I think she's a great editor, absolutely.
Yeah, I met her at Trek Long Island, which is a convention that's held out on Long Island every year. And we did a panel together. She is great. She knows Star Trek very well. I'm hoping we get to work together at some point. We haven't been able to make it work yet.
Yeah, I hope so, man. Because I'd love to see you write a Star Trek comic book.
Yeah, no, I've done a few.
I didn't know that. Which ones did you do?
Way back in 1999, I did one for Wildstorm when they had when they had the license. I did a Next Generation comic called Perchance to Dream, and for IDW, I did 2 one-shots. This is way before Heather's time. This was when Andrew Stephen Harris was the editor. I did an Alien Spotlight comic on the Klingons, and I did when they did the Captain's Log series of one-shots. I did the one for Jellicoe.
That's great, man. That's fantastic. And also, by the way, I want to acknowledge your great ebooks that you did for the Starfleet Corps of Engineers.
Thank you. That was so much fun.
Again, man, no, you guys, you introduced all these new characters, and it's like, no, this is I mean, that's the thing. It doesn't have to be the crews that we've known and loved all these years. You can tell new stories. I think really everything about the Star Trek universe is rife for great stories. And that, again, going back to even Skeleton Crew, it's like, no, good. Let's have a new Star Wars story that doesn't involve the Jedi, that doesn't involve, it's like, no, what do normal people do during this world? That's
why I liked Discovery better when they jumped to the 32nd century, because it was moving forward, and it was giving us new stories. It wasn't relying on, I mean, I wish Discovery had done that in the first place, that they had just started in the future. There was no reason not to. Yes, it means you don't have Harry Mudd, you don't have Spock, you don't have Sarek. So what?
Right. So what? They're unnecessary.
Yeah.
To me, it smacked of, we don't have confidence in our story, so therefore, she's Spock's sister. Isn't that interesting?
It's been in a lot of pop culture, not just on Star Trek.
I know. Again, Amelia Holmes, and I remembered her name. Yeah, but yeah, it's like
that was based on a novel, and that was actually pretty cool. I enjoyed that.
It can be done properly, but sometimes not.
But things, bringing it, like using Khan in Star Trek Into Darkness, in using Blofeld in the James Bond
Spectre, missed opportunities,
and just it doesn't. It's better. It's just counting on the nostalgia to do your work for you. Hell, that was half my problem with what Zack Snyder did with Superman, was trying to make us believe after giving us an entire movie in Man of Steel in which Superman is not even remotely heroic at all, and then in the next movie, he's killed, and we're supposed to believe that this is such a horrible thing that Mother Box will come and do the world, because everybody mourns Superman. It's like, why did you mourn Superman? You didn't even like him, and he was only there for 18 months. But it's counting on a character's pop culture footprint to do your storytelling work for you.
Agreed.
And it's frustrating, and we saw too much of that in the first season of Discovery, especially. The second season I thought did a better job with it, because in Pike we didn't know that much about Pike. There wasn't that much.
Pike
all
was
we had was him,
interesting.
and we saw him at his lowest point. And Anson Mount did a really good job of showing us a much more rounded character than what we got in just one pilot episode. They didn't bring. It's funny, at the time it annoyed me, but in retrospect, I think it was the right move. Spock didn't even show up until halfway through the season.
That's right.
There was, you'll pardon the expression, the search for Spock up until then. What I referred to it at the time jokingly was a Spock tease, but
It was.
but in retrospect, it was the right move because it was focused on Discovery's characters, not on the nostalgic.
But even little things like the Talos 4 episode, I really loved that they brought Vina back, and you really saw that tragedy of that relationship. Yeah. However, the Telosians, again, they're in the original episode, and it made sense when you think about it, that the Telosians were these shriveled up tiny little things because they've been using their brains for so long, their bodies just naturally atrophied. Yeah. And then in the Telosian Discovery episode, they're basketball tall. Hey, how you doing? We have mind powers. And again, it's a choice, but it's like, no, dummies. You get a bunch of tiny women just like they did in the original one. Go ahead.
Yeah. But also they were basically voyeurs, which is what they were in the original.
Oh no, absolutely. But again, it's and I don't mean
that's a production design thing, not a writing thing. I mean
it's a choice, and again, that's when you need somebody up there going, hey, they were tiny, actually women playing these aliens with male voices.
There are people saying that, but they don't always listen. And
right.
The problem, that specific problem is also a problem with Discovery and just generally in that the production design is often ridiculous. It's been better in Stranger Worlds. Stranger Worlds, I think, has done a much better job of giving us an Enterprise that looks like that reminds you of the original series Enterprise. The problem is you can't just duplicate it exactly because
I get that.
Because honestly, if you take out the transporter and the warp drive, my house is more technologically
100%, man. Oh, my God. Oh, and by the way, another thing about Section 31. Oh, this is my tricorder. How you doing? Yeah. How you doing? Yeah, great. It's like, you guys are jerks. I'm sorry. They're jerks, man.
I mean, I watch Next Generation now, and I'm supposed to be impressed by the fact that they're handing iPads to each other.
Yeah, but again, it's we understand it's the 90s, and I can appreciate. All I know is Enterprise was still conscious of the fact that, all right, and again, because it was the same producers, we can't get that far technologically advanced. It has to be this medium ground from today to where we'll be in the 23rd and 24th century.
They did okay with it. They didn't always pull it off, but that's why doing a prequel I think is a bad idea. Why I would have rather they just move forward. But nah.
James wants to know what his odds are of pitching Strange New Worlds. I don't know, James.
Slim.
Is he a real writer?
I have no idea.
Okay, because honestly, there's please tell people the reality, because
the writers' rooms are set. They hire at this point. It's not like it was, when Next Gen, DS9 and Voyager were on the air,
where they had an open submission policy, and a lot of story ideas did come from people that weren't licensed writers, that didn't have WGA credits. But those days are gone. That's a long time ago.
Those days were barely there in the first place. Star Trek was the only show that really did that.
Yep.
That was a very unique thing that they did. And I know it's very easy and very worthwhile to slag Rick Berman, but I will give him credit for that.
I agree. I agree about that.
You're right. I could go on at great length about what a horrible person Rick Berman is. Especially
it's pretty loud.
Things that came out since then, but And it would have been better if he just stuck to being the money guy, because he was good at being the money guy. But he did approve that, and that was something that was really valuable. But again, rare. You have to, in order to become part of a writing staff of a TV show, you have to become a TV writer. You have to go out there and sell things to shows and sell yourself and hopefully find your way onto it. But it's incredibly difficult.
I always tell people, because they ask me, how do I break into comics? And it's, I got a great Superman story. I'm like, well, then create a cipher. And there's certainly been plenty of them. You don't need Superman himself to tell a great Superman story, and especially ones that maybe deviate from the normal path. Yeah. I'm burping, everybody. Forgive me.
Yeah.
Mark Waid did it with Irredeemable.
Yeah.
Where what if we had a Superman that crossed the line? Rob Liefeld had his Supreme character and stuff that clearly was a Superman cipher. Yeah. So, and the same goes with Batman. It's the thing, you can create your own character. And that's why I would say this to James. If you got a good idea, there's a lot of Star Trek clone ebooks and regular novels that people are telling great stuff that clearly has been inspired by Star Trek. Again, going back to the Orville, which it grew. I wasn't crazy about it the first season, but I really think the second season and especially the third season, they found their footing, and they made a good show.
I enjoyed it. I watched the show and I'm thinking, wow, you didn't do any world building at all. It was
blatantly Star Trek.
And it would have been nice to have given it a little bit of its own unique identity. And I have to say, Seth MacFarlane has a great life, and that Fox was willing to give him millions of dollars to write his own self-insert Star Trek fanfic. Good for him. Having said that, there were some. I love the way they developed the Moclan culture and used it to.
My God, what a great story! Man, I got to meet Peter Macon, I believe is his name, his last name, and I'm like, that relationship you had, and oh my God, when their kid wants, for people who don't know. Yeah. It's two men, and their race, can conceive, and they give birth to a girl, but it's against their civilization for women, so they do corrective surgery to make the women that are born men. And I mean, my God, what a horrific idea, but it really does play into the whole trans question, and they really handle it in a very delicate way, the way that science fiction can take a tough real world idea and debate it. And then, my God, that episode, there's a later episode, and I told Peter, my God, you had me crying, man, especially when he sang that great Nat King Cole song, Nature Boy, as a distraction of what was really going on. And I'm like, and he goes, the funny thing is, he goes, I come from a heavy metal background, and I'm actually in a heavy metal band. And he goes, the last thing I ever thought I'd do is sing a Nat King Cole ballad. I'm like, dude, you nailed it, man. You were amazing. So, it's I love Orville. I really, really love Orville.
I enjoy it. Like I said, and also one of the biggest problems with the show is one that I don't know how they fix. By far, the worst actor on the show is the lead.
But he's earnest. I still agree with you, but I think they managed
to. He's so bad, except he's being acted off the screen by literally everybody else in the cast.
You're right. You're right.
It's just.
I don't know, man. Because again, his relationship with. Were they the Krall? I forget, or the Krell.
The Krill.
And his whole and it really pays. I mean, something that happens in the second season that pays off in the final season.
No, in general, I liked it. It was a fun show. I'm glad I finally did, because I didn't like it at first either. I thought it was just
Well, and as I understood it, to justify the budget that it took to make the show, Fox is like, it's got to be an hour, and it was so obvious that their stories were not built to be hour-long stories in that first season. Yeah. And they struggled. And also, my God, how many great Star Trek vets, both from a production and writing standpoint, did they, Dave Goodman and Brandon Braga. And it's like, well, these guys know how to do it. Yeah. And also, by the way, on New Trek, and I know he's a difficult person, and now I'm blanking, 7% Solution. And
Nicholas Meyer. Yeah.
Nicholas Meyer, yes.
I understand. Nicholas Meyer had never been in a TV writer's room before.
Oh, that's a problem.
And it didn't
gel. Okay,
he is putting together a con thing.
All right, much like the Section 31 movie, we're waiting. I don't think it's him. I think
it's going to be an audio drama.
Yes, and I know that too. But it's like, all right, let's go. I mean, I don't know what the hell they're waiting for.
It's been through some stuff, but it's coming.
It's still coming.
I think they're recording it now.
Well, that's great. I hope it happens and everything, because I love that's. Would you ever want to do audio drama, Keith?
I'd be willing to.
You're an old. I mean, you mentioned you liked the old, Hornets shows. I'm a big old-time radio fan.
I mean, it's not something I've ever actually done. I tried pitching to Big Finish for Doctor Who a while back, and it never went anywhere, unfortunately.
Too bad. So I understand.
But speaking of audio, I do want to mention one other project that I've got coming out that I'm very excited about. Blackstone Audio recently got into publishing their own books. And they have the rights to Weird Tales magazine.
Oh, great.
And the 2023 was the 100th anniversary of Weird Tales, and I had a story.
Wow.
They did an anthology called 100 Years of Weird.
Fantastic.
Which was about half reprints from the first 100 years of the magazine and half new stories. And I had a story in that, which was nice.
Horror anthology, everybody. Weird Tales, if you don't know, but keep going.
Yeah. And they're publishing the magazine like 3 or 4 times a year.
Okay.
Still, Jonathan Mayberry is the editor-in-chief of it.
Oh, that's great. Good for John. Yeah. That's terrific.
And they also started up a book imprint called Weird Tales Presents. Jonathan actually led off the imprint last year with a book called Necrotech. Kevin Anderson's writing for it, a bunch of other people. And I've got a series coming out from that in the second half of 2025. It's an urban fantasy called Supernatural Crimes Unit, which it's about a division of the NYPD that handles crimes involving magic and monsters.
Excellent.
I really had a lot of fun with this. I really hope it takes off. The pre-order link should be going up soon. It hasn't yet. But if you keep an eye on my social media, I will not be shy about it once it goes live. But the pre-order link should be going up very soon. It's an ensemble piece with a crew of detectives who basically what happened was a vampire killed a mayoral aide, at which point people had to admit that this stuff is for real. And so the NYPD formed a unit to deal with it. And they're still sort of struggling to figure out how to deal with a lot of these things.
Sure.
Because the lawyers are having a field day with it, certainly. And they get issued things like silver bullets and stuff, and they have to requisition them, and there's paperwork and all sorts of stuff. But I had a lot of fun with it, and I'm hoping it will develop into a series.
When it's ready to be talked about, and you can send me a PDF and everything, you're welcome back to talk about it.
Yeah.
I love, honestly, Bob Greenberger, like I said, Mike Friedman. These guys are really, I really respect my good friend Marty Pascoe before he passed away. I really, I really respect these guys, and you're included in that group of really great writers that understand genre fiction and do a great job when they get the opportunities and stuff. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you today. So, believe me, I wanted to, and I know we both want to dance on Section 31, and
yeah.
What are you going to do? But thankfully, there are positive things to talk about. And that's why, so we're days away from your Green Hornet story in Detroit Noir City from Moonstone. And
there's going to be a live stream Thursday night to promote it, and I believe it's going live on Friday. So
that's excellent. Well, then maybe that's an excuse for me to at least talk to him, possibly if I don't know who's editing it.
David Boop is the editor of the book.
Okay. And
I'm sure he would love to talk about it, and so would probably most of the writers as well. So
yeah, man, no, and maybe that's an excuse for me to finally talk to Timothy Zahn or Kevin Anderson too.
Yeah,
because I'm big fans of theirs as well, obviously. Yeah. No, that's Keith. That's great, man, and I'm really glad that because really, I do think the book market has faced its own challenges in the last literally since the 21st century. I'm glad that there are outlets for your stuff. And
it's changing. I don't think it's in any danger of going anywhere. Partly because ebooks have become a thing, ebooks have more or less taken over the niche that mass market books used to have.
Yes, agreed.
It's very handy, especially speaking as somebody who lives in New York City. Books that you don't have to physically carry or store is useful.
I say that honestly. Everyone who wants to send me their comic or their novel, I'm like, PDF, please, because I'm very content to read it on my tablet. Absolutely.
Yeah, and also, the rise of audiobooks has been huge.
I love it. And I love that not only narrating, but audio drama. And again, being the nerd, being the old-time radio nerd that I've been since I was a little kid, it's thrilling how great my friend Rob Burnett, I don't know if you know Robert Meyer Burnett.
I know Robert.
He directed Free Enterprise back in 99. And he just, with Max Collins, adapted Max's first Nathan Heller detective book as an audio drama, and it's called.
Nice.
They're halfway through it. It's called True Noir.
Very nice.
And it's Michael Rosenbaum from Smallville plays the detective. Anthony LaPaglia plays Al Capone, and David Strahan plays Frank Nitti. And he's got Katie Sackhoff from Battlestar is Nathan Heller's girlfriend in it and stuff. He's got a great cast of actors. Really, Jeff Combs is even in it as well. Exactly. I know. I was just rewatching the Deep Space Nine documentary last night, and it's like, he and the guy who played the Admiral in Enterprise, Vaughn Armstrong.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, but even more so Jeff, because Jeff got to do a lot more nuanced characters.
They brought him back on Lower Decks too. He voiced that
AI
agonist.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. Again, that's man, Prodigy and Lower Decks. It's like, folks, if you're disappointed and really like Section 31, and it's like, oh, this is what they're doing with Star Trek. Watch Lower Decks. Watch Prodigy. Home cooking waiting for you. Do not worry. And please go back and look through the bibliography of Keith's, because so many great novels, so many great short stories as well of Star Trek. I hope, I know that Titan stopped the Explorer magazine. Will they ever, and have they ever collected the short stories?
They've been putting out collections of the stories in Explorer in these little big hardcovers that are fully illustrated. They each have a different title, but the Nog and Nesri Dax stories in a collection that's called The Mission and Other Stories. One just came out, which is called Deep Breath, A Year to the Day That I Saw Myself Die and Other Stories. Which
sounds like a Harlan Ellison title.
I've got two stories in there. David Mack has two stories in there. Una McCormick, I think, is in that one. And Una's in that one. And Walter Koenig wrote a Chekhov focused story.
Outstanding
magazine, which is in that. That's the lead story in the book.
Excellent. And we remind everyone that reactormag.com, the former Tor website, is where you can find Keith's reviews and rewatches. Yep. So is it you said they dropped a Babylon 5 today about knives. A great first episode, first season up, right? First season?
Second season.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm almost done with the second season at this point, actually.
Oh man,
this is the Babylon 5 rewatch. I started it last year because last year was the 30th anniversary of when the TV show debuted. Because I finished all my Star Trek rewatches and such when I finished with Enterprise. And so at this point I've covered like everything on Reactor Magazine in some form or other. And I thought it would be fun to do B5 because they've been talking. They just had that animated movie released.
I liked it,
which I haven't watched it yet. So
I'll leave it at that. I liked it.
And with the reboot hopefully happening, I thought it'd be a good time to read. And I had not watched the show since first run. I watched it regularly and eagerly when it first came out, but I never went back to it, and I was kind of afraid to. But it's the thing I was most worried about was whether the first generation CGI would still work, and it's fine. I mean, it is fine.
I agree, man.
It's no worse than any other CGI was pretty much up until 2010. 2010 was really around when they finally started getting it right. The pretty much all CGI prior to 2010 looks like it takes place in a different space-time continuum from the live action stuff. It worked best for things like in Spider-Man or Daredevil or the Kaminoans in Attack of the Clones, where it's something light and ethereal. CGI was really bad at showing mass for a very long time. That was the biggest problem with the Ang Lee Hulk movie, was that I didn't believe that was a large human.
Agreed.
It got better about that as time went on, and
sure.
And but the stuff on B5 is fine.
And again, it's the story. I mean, any Doctor Who fan.
I wasn't worried about that.
I understand it, but my point is, like, classic Doctor Who. My God, they had the worst budget in the world, but the stories were great, and you accepted it because the stories are strong. And I would say the same thing about B5. It's a great series.
The other problem with B5 that I was worried about, and that was partly borne out, especially in the first season, was that there was some very bad acting on that show. There was also some really great acting on that show. So, and it got better as it went along. But, I had forgotten David McCallum was in an episode of the first season.
Yes.
It was terrible. I didn't think David McCallum could be terrible. And he was, oh God.
How about, but the Michael York episode was really good.
I haven't gotten to that one yet.
Okay. Oh, that's still coming, I guess. I thought that was early enough.
No, but David Warner was in an episode. It was actually pretty good.
Yes. I love David Warner. Come on, man. Yeah. Everything. I mean, literally, my awareness started with Time After Time, speaking of Nicholas Meyer. But also that great Batman animated series 2-parter with Ra's al Ghul.
Oh, yeah. He was
quintessential Ra's al Ghul.
That's the voice I hear in my head when I read Ra's al Ghul in the comics now.
So agree. I so agree. And Liam Neeson's great. But really, man, no, David Warner, was just like how Hamill and Kevin Conroy were so great playing Batman and the Joker. I've yet to meet Hamill. I did meet Kevin Conroy on several occasions, and nothing.
Hilariously, I never met Conroy, but my wife did, because my wife ran an H&R Block office in the neighborhood he lived in New York, and he walked in to get his taxes done.
That's great.
And like she heard it, like she heard the voice. It's like, I know that voice.
Hi, how are you?
And she went out there. His name was right there, Kevin Conroy.
My buddy is Susan Eisenberg, the animated Wonder Woman. Yeah. I always call her the animated Amazon. She loves that. And no, she was always incredibly gracious. That if we were all at a convention, she's like, Kevin, and I had him on like we're doing this right now and everything on streaming. But she's like, Kevin, you remember John, because she organized a JLA cast table read during the pandemic.
Nice.
And we even had Andrea Romano directing it.
Oh,
and
wow.
even Carl Lumley, who doesn't do a lot of conventions, came on. And I'm like, Carl, you got to tell me everything about, and now I'm blanking, his show from the early 90s on Fox, his superhero show. Mantis, yes. Yeah. And it was great because even he was honest, and he's like, I really like that pilot. He goes, but after that, the scripts really sucked. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. And thankfully, if you haven't seen early 90s, the Mantis, the pilot is, at least the last time I checked, was still on YouTube, and I recommend checking it out because
Mantis
it is pretty
an acronym. It's M period, A period, N period, T period, I period.
That's true. Yeah. That's right, and it's great because it's a disabled man who creates kind of his own suit and is able to do amazing things with it. It's a really great story.
Yeah, the series was dreadful, but
unfortunately. Were you a Nowhere Man fan with Bruce Greenwood? I liked it.
I didn't get into it. I tried it. It didn't do it. It didn't do anything for me.
Very Prisoner-esque to me in a good way.
Yeah.
In a good way. But Keith, this was great, man. Honestly, I hope I'm not keeping you from.
I do need to get going, but But it was a pleasure being on here again.
It's my pleasure having you, man. And again, we'll remind people at the end of this week, Moonstone. It sounds like Friday is when it'll likely the campaign debuts for Detroit Noir City. This great new Green Hornet anthology featuring a lot of great writers, among them Timothy Zahn, Bill Willingham, Keith, Kevin Anderson, Mary Fan, amazing group, Megan Mackey as well. I'm doing that for the audio people as well as the video people. Yeah. And man, and also this new thing coming from the people that bring us Weird Tales. Yes. A very cool series starting off with
Unit. Hopefully soon. I'm easy to find online. If you do a search for Keith DeCandido, I'm the only thing that's going to turn up. I post regularly on Facebook and on Blue Sky, on Instagram and Threads. I have a blog because I'm old, and I post regularly on Reactor Mag. I'm very easy to find online, and I'm once the pre-order link for SCU goes up, I will not be shy about mentioning it. And Eliminate the Impossible, the alternate Holmes anthology is available now in ebook. The print book we're going to be debuting the print book at the Farpoint convention in February, from 7th, 8th, and 9th of February. And amusingly, one of the big guests at Farpoint is from Section 31, one of the actors.
Oh, see, and I was so nervous about doing my panel with Celia and Ethan, because I have been vocal about my frustrations, but also I'm like, all right, I'm conducting a panel. I'm not going to be an asshole. I always tell the podcasters who are like, well, I really want to give the writer my opinion. And I'm like, well, then don't have him as a guest, because the operative word is guest. And I had a room full of people that were psyched about Strange New World.
Yes.
So my only teasing of the third rail was, like I said, is Starfleet a military organization or not? And again, Ethan just shot me this look like, really? And I'm like, come on, man, give me one. Just give me one.
And also, I've met both of them. They're both sweethearts.
They're terrific. They're wonderful people. And again, I even Section 31, and I feel for this actor, because it's not his fault. It's never the actor's fault.
Yeah.
It's the people that are writing and the lines they're given and the director.
And the thing is, even as bad as Section 31 is, Michelle Yeoh is always worth watching, even in something terrible. She is. She is an absolute joy to watch. She's always completely.
Normally, I agree, and I love her. Not only in genre stuff, but even like, my God, she's so great in Crazy Rich Asians.
Yeah.
And I'm thrilled that she won the Oscar for a genre piece.
Yeah,
but
she was in a TV show that was on Netflix that I'm pissed wasn't renewed. It was called The Brother's Son. which is
Don't know
about Taiwanese crime family. It's brilliant.
Oh my God, I'd love to
totally
watch that.
recommend it.
That would be great. I'm gonna
Yeah.
look for it. Brother Son, okay, on Netflix,
Yes.
everybody. Very
She
cool.
was great in that.
Well, you've given us, and I'm glad we've covered so much of your bibliography, because truly, folks, you really got to look up Keith. If you've never read Keith's stuff before, you will not be disappointed. And if you want your entry point to be the Star Trek stuff, good news, Keith knows how to write Star Trek and write it well. So truly, man, it's really a pleasure seeing you. Please come back when your new book is ready.
Definitely.
Because I'm happy to talk to you again. All right. Thanks, everybody, for watching. I'm taking tomorrow off, but I'm trying to remember what I'm doing on Wednesday. I got somebody good on. By the way, Thursday, and I got to do my imitation. Dave DiDio, of course, the former publisher of DC. He's going to be on because he's got a new comic book series. He's got a lot of other projects, and that's coming up on Thursday. But it'll be a good week here on Word Balloon Live, so I hope you'll join us. Until then, everybody stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.